start. Here we go. So thank you all again for joining us. I'm going to hand over to Suzanne to introduce herself firstly, and then Kevin, and then we'll move substantively into the each of the workshop sessions. So Suzanne, over to you.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming along today. My name is Suzanne Reece. I started life as a solicitor. I primarily worked for large insurance companies doing defendant personal injury work and employers' liability work, so accidents, working for local authorities where there were personal injury with their staff or members of the public slipping and tripping. And I did that for just over 17 years, really enjoyed it, but felt that it was time to move on. And then I went into education and I started lecturing on the bar practice course and did that for 10 years. And then I started my own business, Inspired Study, doing coaching, webinars and online courses for law students. And that's where I am at the moment.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Suzanne, for being here with us today. Kevin, over to you.
Hi, so I'm Kevin Withane. I guess my day job is I'm an in-house counsel, so I'm a senior lawyer for a public listed company in the UK. I'm actually talking to you now from Detroit, where I'm currently based, at least for another few more weeks before we've decided to return home because we need to get out crazy. You know, so with my career, actually, I've worked in many different sectors. I actually qualified as a barrister and then started working for a charity. Then what I don't know if they still have these things in the UK now, Quango, which was a quasi-governmental organisation, sort of part private, part public, responsible for the railways. And my first sort of role there was actually buying and selling train sets, which was fun. And then I moved as a head of legal to a small telecoms company. I watched that at its height collapse within the space of 1 year because the owners like to spend money on cricket and entertaining cricket stars than actually on the actual business. Then I moved to China with an international law firm, a UK firm. I was based in their Shanghai and Hong Kong offices. I did that for a couple of years, then ended up moving to Moscow in Russia and joined a US law firm, which is extremely different from a UK law firm. And then in the financial crisis, I was made redundant whilst in Moscow. So came back to the UK, bought a camper van, drove around France and Spain, decided I needed to get a job. So went out to Thailand, to interview out there for a law firm out there. Then I realized actually I don't need to get a job yet. So I'm going to go and learn Chinese, which I'd been in Shanghai and Hong Kong and actually didn't learn anything. So went to Shanghai and studied at a university, studied Chinese there. And then my ex-wife got pregnant, so decided I needed to get a job now. So then moved back to the UK and joined my current company. And then I've sort of done the trip again with the current company. So started in Oxford, then Shanghai, then Hong Kong, and for the last 3 years, Detroit. That's me.
Wow, Kevin. I mean, what an introduction. Lots and lots of exciting stories. I liked the camper van bit, I think, best. That's great. Thank you both for those introductions. I should have said, and I know that we've got some new people joining us that haven't been on Redefined sessions before. My name is Zinat. I'm a barrister at 25 Bedford Row and also the founder of this project. I also do some lecturing at the University of Warwick, and the whole purpose of Redefined really is to provide a platform for aspiring lawyers from underrepresented groups, but really to talk about topics that may not always be covered, or topics that are talked about, but perhaps not as candidly or as honestly as we may like in the legal profession. One of the themes in our sessions that we do is professional development, but also personal development. And that's really why we brought you this session today on confidence, because one of the things that I've experienced going through the profession so far is that it's really easy to see people celebrating their successes, their awards, how many amazing things they've done, what fancy firms they're at, what fancy chambers they're at, when they've got tenancy and pupillage. But actually what we don't talk enough about is all the, you know, the failures, quotation marks, along the way, and the losses. That makes things quite difficult sometimes, especially if you're looking at other people. And so the purpose of today's session is really to hear from two fantastic people about confidence, how we can grow through those rejections and failures, and how to basically put ourselves in the best position to succeed in the legal world. So with all that said, I'm going to hand over to Suzanne, who will be delivering the first half of the workshop. And then after that, we'll have a short Q&A, and then we'll go on to Kevin.
Okay, thanks very much, Suzanne. The first thing that sometimes comes across when people are being interviewed is this idea that they don't look confident, that they look nervous, they didn't look like they fitted in. And to the person having the interview, well, of course they're nervous, but how do you look confident? How do you look like you own the space and you fit into an organization? And what I want to just explore with you over the next couple of slides is what confidence looks like. Because if we know what confidence looks like and how it feels, we can then use this when we go into an interview situation. So this is an interactive session where I really would like you to unmute and answer questions that I ask as we go through the slides. And so if someone's unmuted and speaking, then if you want to speak, wait till that person's finished speaking, then unmute yourself and join the conversation. So first of all, we're going to look at a series of pictures. And what I want you to think about when you look at each of these pictures is who looks confident in the picture and why do they look confident? So the first picture is a group of people. Who in that picture do you think looks confident? Kevin, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to. So I think the two people I would say look confident. The guy in the green,
yes,
and the woman looking at him. I think.
Which woman?
The woman with in the middle.
With a blue folder.
Yeah, I think they look confident to me. The guy with the computer open, I think he wants to show that he's confident, but he's sort of hiding a bit behind the computer. And I think the girl who's reading the book is hiding. She's listening, but she's just hiding behind the book.
So she's smiling, but she's not really engaging. So we're going to eliminate her as not looking confident. So that leaves the three people. And from what I can see in the chat, people seem to think the gentleman in the green shirt looks confident. What is it about him that oozes confidence? Is it because people are looking at him? What is it? He's not actually speaking, or what does his body language suggest to people?
I think his can you hear me?
Yes, we can, thank you.
Yeah, I think his sort of posture is quite approachable.
Yeah. So Elizabeth says open and engaged. He's not crossing his arms and looking tense. His hands are relaxed. His gaze is quite relaxed. Now, if we look at the gentleman behind the laptop, he looks eager to please, but he doesn't look confident, in my opinion. Anyone agree? How does the guy in the blue look to you? Because he's smiling, he's got eye contact.
Yeah.
And then the lady with the blue folder, there's a tentativeness about her. She's definitely got the confidence of the direct eye contact, but does she look as confident as the man in the green? Let's leave a question mark there. Can we have the next slide? So it's the same question. Who does he look confident? And if he does, what is it about him that looks confident? He's got his arms folded, he's relaxed, he's smiling, there's eye contact there.
I would say he looks like he belongs there.
Okay. Why would you say that?
He looks comfortable.
Comfortable. Is comfortable and confident the same thing?
Not always, but I'd say there's like attributes that sort of overlap.
Okay. So Elizabeth says his facial expression is slightly tense. Is that a genuine smile, or is it? Or Holly thinks he looks confident as well. Some people, when I've spoken to them in groups, actually says that he looks like he's faking confidence.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I think he's faking it to make it.
He's faking it to make it. But what is it? What is it that doesn't look sincere? Doesn't look genuinely confident? The body language, relaxed, but maybe the folding of the arms.
Yeah, defensive.
Something away. The smile isn't quite as open and natural. Okay, so let's have a question mark about him. He's borderline, maybe. Next slide, please. Now, this lady looks lovely. She's got a nice suit on. She looks professional. Does she look confident?
Something about her makes me feel like she might be a little bit hesitant.
Yeah. Is it the smile or is it the eyes?
I think it's definitely the facial expression.
Okay. So that facial expression, you know, which just a hint of, I'm not really sure I should be here, is all over her face, despite the fact that she looks the part brilliantly. Okay. Anyone else got any thoughts on this lady? No? Okay. We'll move on to the next slide. Next slide. Great. No, you've gone too far. Back, please. Thank you. No, forward one. This is like digital dancing. Perfect. So how does this lady look? Bubbly. Is bubbly the same as confident? Okay, so she's relaxed, she's warm, confident. Okay, again, the posture is open. There's something about the face that says, I'm confident, I'm assured of myself, I'm happy. Yeah. So we know nothing about the minds of these people. And just as when you go into an interview, nobody knows how good or bad you are at the subject or the job that you're going to apply for. But so much of your body language can demonstrate that you're not confident. And it's very, very important for you to spend time thinking about how these little things about the way you sit, about the way you cross your arms, you cross your feet, your facial expressions can communicate to someone interviewing you a feeling about you as a person. And it is so important for you to come across as approachable, likable, bubbly, open, confident, owning the space. And that starts in the head. It comes down into the facial expression, the body language. And it's a case of, you've heard this expression, fake it until you make it. It really is about making sure that you really get into owning the space that you want to occupy before you occupy it. If you go into an organization feeling this place is too grand, it's too impressive, this is not the place that I should be working, that's what you'll communicate to the interviewer. If you go into an organization going, yes, this place is impressive, this is where I should be working, and that's your attitude when you're in the interview, that will be communicated as you go through your interview and reflected in the questions and the answers that, well, in the answers that you give to interview. So my advice is really think about what it is that you want and how you want to own it before you even step into a building to go for an interview. So could I have the next slide, please? Now, confidence, according to the English Oxford Dictionary, is a positive feeling gained from a belief in your own ability to do things well. It doesn't mean that you will always be perfect. It doesn't mean that you won't get things right, but it has to be an inner belief in you that with the right training, with the right experience, you will do things well. If you go into life and to interviews with the idea, I'm going to be rubbish at a job, then of course that's going to be communicated in your body language, your facial expression. And if you believe positively that I'm a really good person to work in this organization, it's exactly the sort of place that I should be working in, and I could do this job brilliantly because I believe that with the right training, the right experience, I will be a great solicitor, great barrister, whatever it is that you want to be, that will be an expression of how you talk, how you walk, how you look, and how you feel. So confidence is not just about you simply reading your stuff, understanding your stuff really well, and then being a bit nervous. You've got to work on all of these non-verbal means of communication, your posture, your body language, and that inner strength that you've got inside and your belief in your own ability to do things well. So, do we have any questions about confidence?
I think one question sorry, was somebody else going to say something before I intervened because I'm obviously not supposed to be asking questions. No?
Okay, so we've got, how do you tread the line between acting confident and being overconfident? I think that was a question.
Yeah.
I don't think, between being overconfident stroke cocky. I don't think if you're well prepared and you believe in your own ability that you appear overconfident. Now, cocky, I think, is when you are prepared and you don't have the ability, but you're trying to talk the talk. So if you're somebody who's got the experience, got the qualifications, believe that you'd be good in that job because you have skills and qualities that that job requires, I think that's fine. You can't be too overconfident. Sometimes we believe that we shouldn't sing our own praises, and I don't think that's true. If you don't sing your own praises, who else is going to sing them? Cocky is when you can't deliver on what you say you are. If you are what you are, I don't think you could be overconfident. Do we have another question? Okay, yeah, we do. I think. I'm trying to read them. If you've got a question, it's really good if you just unmic, because my chat box has jumped. Just
hey, Suzanne, there's a really good one here from Elizabeth Walker.
Okay, Elizabeth.
Says, as a female, I have found in the past at work or uni that people have described me as bossy when being confident at a task in comparison to male counterparts being described in a positive light. How do I go about challenging, correcting that? That's a great question.
Okay. So I completely understand what you're saying, Elizabeth, because as a lecturer, I've seen it in the classroom where they'll male students and female students, And okay, so thanks, Elizabeth. Elizabeth's not able to use their mic at the moment. There are male and female students, and some people might describe the male students as being confident and knowledgeable, while the female students are doing exactly the same thing, are described as bossy. I think you first of all have to work out who is it that's calling you bossy. If it's, you know, people who see you as a competitor and don't want you to do as well as you're doing, I think you ignore them, especially, you know, because what will happen is people who don't have the skill set, are not as organized and as confident, will want to pull someone down to their level. So if it's one of your peers who's describing you as bossy, I would politely suggest to them that there's a difference between being bossy, organized, confident, and in your opinion, you think you're confident and organized, and that you disagree with them. Now, if it's in the workplace where it's someone who's managing you, who's describing you as bossy, well, that's more of a challenge, because there are processes like appraisals and things like that that you need to go through, where they may bring up the idea that perhaps your style is a little abrasive and you're too bossy. And I agree, you know, lots of people in management will see a woman as bossy, but a man as confident. I think things are changing, but I think that you have to reflect on the feedback you're given. And if you speak to some other work colleagues and they say, no, he's just being an idiot. But if you get a lot of people who say, well, we actually think you come across as very bossy, it may mean that you've got to reflect on the way that you approach things and be a bit more touchy-feely with people, maybe explain why you've organized something in a particular way, or you're directing something. Give people maybe the opportunity to take control, and if no one wants to take control, then you step in. So I think it's a case of, you know, there are some people who clearly don't want you to do well, and they'll use being bossy as a way of bringing you down. Ignore them. If it's someone in management, I would say reflect on it. Talk to your other work colleagues. If they're saying the same thing, then maybe reflect on how you interact with people. If it's one person saying it, then I think it's like the school scenario where that one person is either threatened by you or wants to undermine you, in which case carry on being who you are and go around them. Does anyone else in the panel want to say anything? Kevin?
Yeah, I would, you know, I think, and as someone who's trying to push forward D&I in my workplace and in other workplaces, that D&I for you is, for everybody, is diversity, equity, inclusion. This is one of the big issues that I see in workplaces, how different groups are treated differently, and I see it in my organization at the highest levels of how we describe certain directors who are women and who do exactly the same thing as their male peers, but they're described as bossy or arrogant, but their male peers are described as they're aggressive, they're showing strength, they're strong. I think be yourself. As Suzanne said, obviously always reflect on the feedback to make sure it's fair. You should also, or you can also, you know, if it's in a work setting with boss, ask them for examples of why, and, you know, have that discussion, because it's all part of your learning and you're part of improving as well. So take the opportunity to have those conversations, as Suzanne said, and take the opportunity to reflect. But if, you know, after that reflection or after having further comments, it really is just a way of undermining you, or just because it's a bias that the person says, well, oh, as a woman you're bossy, then ignore it and continue being that person. And unfortunately, the world today is in one way really sad that you have to do this, and, you know, it could affect you if you continue, but then The alternative is it stops you in your organization, and if it does continue in that organization, then I'd say I'd be looking at, well, is that the right organization for you? Because you should be in a place where you can be yourself.
Yeah, totally agree. Thanks, Elizabeth. That's a really great question, and I'm sure an issue that many people have. Someone once described me as a feisty black woman, and I sort of looked at them and thought, what on earth are they talking about? I am the most polite person whenever we have team meetings. And they're like, oh, no, the course director's frightened of you. You're a feisty black woman. Just because I'm not going to agree with everything one person has to say, because it might not be a good idea. And there are many people in the organisation who were just prepared to go along with whatever the leader said, because they realised saying something would often just cause trouble for them or would be ignored. And that's never been my character, so it's never going to happen. If I think there's a better way, I'm just going to, stand up and voice that. Because I think we should always try to do our best. And if there's a better way of doing things, that's what you do. But not everybody likes that in organisations. So it is true. Find an organisation that is happy with women who can voice alternative opinions to those in management and are happy to accept that and to help the organisation to grow. And I think increasingly there are more and more organisations who think it's important that their staff are open, that they have different views expressed, and that they take that forward in the way that they make decisions, rather than just paying lip service to it. Okay, so the next session, we're going to look at the scenario where you have you've applied for an interview, but you haven't got an interview. So could I have the slides for section 3? Right, overcoming rejection. So we all know that we work very hard applying for job applications, and it is disheartening when you don't even get a letter acknowledging your application, and disappointing when you get that letter that says, sorry, you've not been selected for interview or shortlisted. So what do you do when you've spent a lot of time and energy and effort actually applying for something and then not had the desired result? Can I have the first slide? So that's what you hoped for, but it didn't happen. So let's see what your options are. Next slide, please. Okay. This is where it's important to, you get disappointment, dwell with the disappointment for a bit, and then you've got to think about your strategy for what you're going to do for the next application. It's important, I think, to recheck your application, look at the application that you submitted and the job criteria, and see if there were any gaps between your skills and qualifications and the application job criteria, and sort of circle those. That may be one of the reasons why you weren't selected for interview. And any gaps that you've got, you need to think about how you can work on those to improve them. I think it's also a good idea to get someone else to look at the application and the job criteria and see if they can see something that you're missing. Quite often we can be very subjective about our applications. Get them to read the job criteria and then look at your application, and quite often, in very simple way, they'll just point something out to you that you've missed. I once went on a ramble with a group of people, and there was this guy there who was head of geography for the whole of Wales Education Authority. And I said to him, my gosh, that's a really important job. How did you get it? And he said, well, it's really easy, Suzanne. What I did when I started as a geography teacher 5 years ago is I looked at the criteria to be director of geography throughout the region. And then I gradually worked my way along the criteria, ticking off the boxes as I went along, and I got the skills or the experience that meant that I fit the criteria, and then I applied for the job. And I'm like, oh my God, that's really logical. I wish I thought about that when I had started out in my career. It sounds stupid, but if you want to get a fantastic job, you have to start planning for it, getting the experience, the qualifications, ticking off the boxes at the very beginning of your career. Don't wait for a job to come up and then go, oh, I think I'll apply for that. Get the job descriptions for those jobs that you want to be in the next 5 years and start working towards getting the skills and experience that those jobs require. Ask for feedback if you've not been selected. Now, I know that that's increasingly difficult because firms will say we've had too many applications, we're not going to give you any feedback. But if you've been through a recruitment agency, especially the legal recruitment agencies, quite often they will have some inside knowledge as to why certain people got shortlisted and who got selected for interview and even who got selected for the position. So keep in contact with a recruiter, chat to them, find out what it was that made the firm prefer other candidates as opposed to your application, and take on board anything that they've got to say. So if they're taking people with more experience, then maybe apply for a job with less experience required, and then you can work your way up to a more senior position once you get into the organization. So having identified what gaps you've got in your work experience or your qualifications, you've got to set out a plan to improve volunteering, work experience, additional studying courses, because that's an investment in yourself that's going to pay off in the short term. And it will be worth getting these additional experience and skills. And don't always think of it as skills in terms of related to the job. It may be that it's, you know, you've contributed to doing some voluntary work in an organization, you've built a network of contacts with people that the firm are very eager to get to know. Don't always think about it as being directly related to the work. It may be outside of work, experience, volunteering, things that show a different side to you. I know somebody who recently got pupillage, and one of the good things that she had in her background was that she was a social media person. She had a massive social media following. She understood how to use it. The chambers weren't that good at social media. She had all these ideas about what they could do to increase the profile, to bring in more work. And they were just like lapping it up at interview. And that's what they wanted. It wasn't, you know, she had the academics, she had the experience, but also she had this social media side to her that they just didn't have. So what are the skill sets that maybe an organization doesn't have that you can bring in and use as an additional benefit? And then reapply. One no is not no forever. Reapply on the next occasion that there's a vacancy. And don't think that because you didn't get it the first time, you won't get it the second time. And then sometimes it's not you. So if you've gone through all of that criteria and you find that you've filled in the job, you more than fulfill the job criteria, someone's checked it and they're saying, yeah, really great. And you've had feedback say, yes, you were a great applicant. And why didn't you get the job then? It may not be you. So it may not be you because they've already in their minds decided to give that job to somebody else. So you're feeling, well, I was perfect for this job, I'm overqualified for this job, but maybe the interview panel had decided they were going to give it to other people. And so it doesn't matter how good you are, there are situations, despite the employment legislation, where people don't get a job despite being the best qualified for it, because they've already made a decision and they're going to give it to another candidate. Sometimes the job's advertised for legal reasons at a certain level, but in effect, so what I heard recently from a friend of mine is there's a teaching job. They had someone apply who was absolutely perfect for the job, right experience, more than qualified to do the job. But whilst the job was advertised at a certain range of salary, in essence, they wanted somebody at the bottom of the scale because they couldn't afford to pay somebody at the top of the scale. But the job advert couldn't say, we want someone newly qualified at the bottom of the scale. It had to say, we want this sort of teacher, and the scale is da 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 da. And really, at the end of the day, despite the best person for the job applying, they gave it to somebody with no experience who was a newly qualified teacher because they would be paid on the bottom of the scale, and that's what their budget was for. So sometimes it's not about you. You have to accept that and just push on and find your place, which is going to be better fitted to your skills. Okay, so do I have another slide? I do. Next slide. It's important when you're using your application form or you're in interviews, you're asked questions on the application form. They want you to fill them in concisely. When you're asked questions in an interview, they want you to give an answer that's got detailed information but answers the question. And I've heard that a lot of law firms really are looking for the STAR technique when people either fill in an application form or answer questions when they're in interview. And if you're not got the STAR technique down to, if you haven't embraced the STAR technique, then the danger is that in those detailed open questions that they ask, why should we employ you, for example, you just ramble on. It has no structure. So STAR is a really lovely technique for answering questions, both in written form and at interview, where especially where you're being asked to demonstrate or illustrate or give an example of the skills or qualities that you've got or how you've reacted in a certain situation. By giving an example in this format, it helps you to be concise and focused in your answer. So you start your question by identifying the situation, explaining the task that you were required to do, tell them what action you took and what the result of that action was. And if you follow that pattern, what you end up doing is describing your skills or your experience in a concise, focused way. And at the end of it, they can remember what the answer to the question was, rather than you rambling on and losing all of that valuable information. So there are lots of really good websites that explain the STAR technique. And I suggest that you Google it, have a look at it. There's some adaptations of different techniques, but essentially they're the same. Focused, specific answers to questions by following a technique in the way that you answer questions, either written or in interview. Can I have the next slide, please? One of the important things to recognize is that nothing happens sometimes in one go. So aim, action, take some action to get to that goal. If you don't get it, adjust, adapt, and have another aim, and you will achieve. Don't think that one rejection, two rejections, three rejections means you're always going to be rejected. It's a constant recycling process. What did I learn from the last application? How can I make it better? And move on, adjust, adapt, and you will achieve. Okay, so that's me. Questions?
Fantastic. Thanks so much for that, Suzanne. We've got a couple of questions for you. So one from Holly, which says, some pupillage applications ask if you've applied before and ask how you have improved. How would you recommend approaching such a question, as I find it hard to know what to include?
I think it's important to be honest. Yes, I've applied before. And I think it comes back to you, before dealing with that application, I always think it's important to sit down and say, what have I done in the last 12 months? What skills have I acquired in the last 12 months? So you've got, what have I done physically? What experience have I done? What skills have I achieved? And you start to write it down. You know, if you're a mapping person or columns, or you like pictures, however it is, start recording it somewhere. And then go and chat to somebody that you really trust and knows you well, and ask them the same question. And you find that they'll add in things that you forgot. And you really have to understand how good you are and what you've done before you even attempt to start to answer that question. And when you've done that process of sieving the things that you've done with specific examples, time periods, dates, then you'll find that you've got a lot to write. And I would use the STAR technique. Choose 2 or 3 examples of how you've improved with concrete examples, with the results of that, and I would answer the question in that way.
Brilliant, thank you. The next question from Iman is, how can you maintain confidence or your passion in the job you want when you've received multiple rejections and feel that you're not getting anywhere in that career path?
Okay, look, I really understand that it is demoralizing, and I understand that it's disappointing, and I'm not for one moment suggesting that you're always going to be, you know, on your A game, fighting fit. There are times when you get letters, where you get rejections, where you just feel rubbish. I got rejected from a job interview that I went for, and I had a weekend of wallowing. I'm like, I was so good for the job and the students would have loved me, but the staff didn't love me. Okay, so I went a weekend of wallowing, and then I spoke to a really good friend who went, Suzanne, that place would have been a nightmare. You wouldn't have fit in. You know, you're too good. They don't even think in the same wavelength as you. And I was like, yeah. So you find your friends who are real supporters and help you and encourage you. And then gradually you start going up. What I find, wherever you get no's, eventually you'll get a yes. So, you know, it is hard and it is demoralizing, it's depressing, but, you know, you have 2 options in this world: lay down and die, or keep fighting. And there are times when you're down and you're out and you want to lay down, and you will feel depressed and disappointed, but you have to have that bounce back. Because what's the option? The option is, okay, give up on your dream and do something else. And maybe that will be an option. But if you're not, that's not your final position yet, just keep pushing through. It's demoralizing, it's hard. Think flexibly. You know, if you're planning to get from route A to B and it's not going A to B, think C, D, and F routes. And that eventually get me to where I want to be, you know?
Well, can I quickly add something on that, Suzanne?
Yeah, do, Kevin.
So when I was starting out in my career, so I went into the bar, and I did the bar rather than the LPC purely because someone said, oh, you're going to be more challenged and it's a bit more vocational and it's not so much writing essays and things like that. So I was like, oh, sounds easier. It was bloody hard. And then I was applying for pupilages, and I knew when I was applying for pupilages, I had this vision of me being general counsel of a company the size of ICI. That's what I wanted to do. And weirdly, I'm sort of in-house now, so it did work out. But I was applying for pupilages, and I'd get some interviews. And before the interviews, actually, some people go, you're the token there. You are the brown guy for the quota of applications. And I tried, and I didn't get it. And but I needed to work. I needed a job. And so I started looking outside as what else can I do, and then someone gave me a chance at the RNID to join them as an in-house lawyer there. And essentially that's the way my career went. And then, you know, I was in-house in the UK. I sort of explained my story, and then I managed to get into private practice in a law firm, and it's because it was a UK law firm. It was Simmons and Simmons in Shanghai. It's because the guy there was an American partner. When I told him, oh yeah, I qualified as a barrister, I'm non-practicing, but he was like, what? You're one of those guys with the wig and gowns? I was like, well, no, because I've been in-house, but yeah, they're the guys. He's like, well, we've definitely got to have you. And he gave me a chance. And the point I'm trying to say is I didn't give up. Like, I didn't give up on the career that I wanted. Like, the pupillage for me was just to get that practicing certificate at the end of it. But then I found another way, and I think it's all about, if it's something you're passionate about and you really want to do, then you will find that way to do it. And it might not be the ideal that you have in your head, but then no job essentially is anyway.
I think that those are both really great responses. Kevin, that really resonates with me in terms of the whole token thing and being made to feel that actually you're not necessarily there on merit and you're there because you're, you know, a person of color or a woman or whatever. But I think that point of, you know, our dreams or where we're supposed to be don't always manifest in the way that we think. And sometimes that's scary and unnerving, but I just feel like we've got to try and learn to trust the process and just have faith and believe that you are where you are right now in time because it's where you're supposed to be, but it doesn't mean you're always going to be there right now. Like it's gonna change and you'll end up somewhere which is best for you. I know in my experience when I was applying for pupillage, I had all these ideas of what I thought was going to be my dream set, interviewed at these places, and I was like, what the heck? Like, these people are so, like, this isn't me, I don't fit in, what the heck are they on about? They're supposedly like committed to human rights, but really they're just a bunch of champagne socialists, etc., etc. So I say that because sometimes things seem really glittery, actually they are not, and that's quite difficult to accept and get over. But it's something that comes with time. Suzanne, I know you've only got 10 minutes left with us, so I've got 2 questions that were in the chat for you earlier on that we didn't get to. So I'm going to give those to you before you have to head off. One is from Holly again, who asks, how would you advise demonstrating confidence during online interviews? I find it hard without them being able to see much body language.
Yeah, I quite understand that. I think online interviews are really, really challenging because literally you've got your face and your shoulders. So that's what you've got to use. It is really about, well, when I say your face, you've got the head, shoulders, and your voice. So it's about how you come across, that sort of soft, confident tone, facial expressions relaxed. And you know, sometimes when you really, really want something, that's when you sort of choke up and you become tight and you can't think and all the rest of it. Sometimes just going with the flow, you know, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. I've done my preparation, it's the best that I can do. Now I'm just going to enjoy this interview, answer the questions as honestly as possible, take that weight off the back of your neck and just enjoy the presentation that you're doing online and accept, you know, this is all I can do and I'm going to give it my all and I'm not going to stress about it. I know that sounds like a contradiction because you've prepared and you really want it, but just stepping down a little bit from that, I really want this sort of tense, like we saw in some of those pictures, I think actually does more for you. Think of it like tennis. You know, if you watch tennis, I've been watching the French Open. If you watch tennis, when they've got a really difficult point to play, you know, it's match point, set point. The ones who do the best are the ones that play the ball like any other game. So they don't think about it being set point. They don't think about it being match point. They just play it and they're relaxed and the ball, brilliant ace down the center line. Those that get, you know, tight and feel, oh my God, I could win the match now, invariably they double fault, lose the next 5 points, lose the set, lose the match. And I think that's a little bit like it is in life. That's been my experience when I've gone to interviews where I have been desperate for a job and I've not performed well because it's almost like it's got in the way. The desperation of wanting the job has got in the way of me presenting my best self. So it's easier when you're older, having had those experiences, to try and relax a bit. But, you know, interviews are nerve-wracking, but try just to bring it down a little bit and not feel that the world will change if you don't get this job. And therefore, there's less pressure on you. And you can smile more, you can enjoy the interview and, you know, hopefully demonstrate in the way that you speak and your visuals, your facial, that you're the right person for the job.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Suzanne. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to suggest that we move on. Yeah, I just want to make sure that Kevin's got enough time because I think he's got to drop off a little bit earlier. But thank you so much for all of your valuable insights, Suzanne. Please, everybody, connect. Feel free to connect. I'm sure Suzanne and Kevin will be all right with that on LinkedIn. Suzanne, I know that you've got your company. Feel free to put the details of that in the chat box before you go. Connect. And thank you so much again because I know you'll drop off shortly. Yeah. Kevin, when you're ready, over to you, and Ariba hopefully will move along your slides for you.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about writing with confidence, which I guess I'm talking about application. So in one way, this is sort of the back, the front at the end. But But can we go to the next slide, please? So part of this is, we've talked quite a lot with Suzanne about confidence, but I want to distinguish that from courage, which is slightly different. So, you know, Suzanne said, sometimes you do have to fake it to make it, because confidence is, it ebbs and flows. Like one day you could be an absolute high, and then the next day you're not. And it's, you absolutely know your stuff, but you don't know why that is. But what courage is about still taking that step when you're feeling low on confidence. And when you're writing applications, particularly after you've been rejected, maybe more than once, it's tiring, it's hard, and it's like, what am I putting down on this piece of paper that isn't getting me into the door, isn't getting me into that room with somebody? Why is my application different from somebody else's? And courage is the will to still continue writing that application, but looking at yourself and trying to understand. And also it's about being you. And sometimes I think, and having seen so many applications now, as someone who does who hires people, sometimes I feel there's overconfidence in written work, which gets them into the room, but then they, what was the word? They've been too cocky with it. As somebody suggested before, as in they've gotten to embellishment to the point of either it's a lie or it's just, you never did this, or it was something you've overstated way more than you actually did, and you've been called out in an interview, and there's nothing worse than sitting there to that. And actually that happened to me in my career. I didn't really have a lot to say because of the jobs I had. Like I had, you know, I was working in Arsenal Football Club as like catering and stuff like that. I didn't have the internships. I didn't have the opportunity to do that. I needed to earn cash to live. I couldn't get paid a stipend as it was back in the day. I think like now they pay a little bit more for internships, but when I was starting out, it was a privilege to get an internship, and I couldn't afford to do one. So then on my applications, it was trying to put these, trying to put something in sounding really confident. And then if I did get the interview, I couldn't really back it up, because it was like, yeah, all I did was actually do a little bit of research. And I didn't write an entire report. I just put some things down for my boss. So it didn't come out that well. So you need to have courage always, whether it's even in the interview section, when you've actually got through the door, it's not always easy to have confidence, and it's not something you can just put on. So that's why you have to fake it and you have to look like you have. But courage is actually taking a step into that room and going forward and being yourself and putting yourself forward. Does anybody have any questions at the moment? No? Okay, can we go to the next slide? So with all writing, and it took me until my 40s to realize this, but it's all about storytelling. And I only realized this after I started reading a lot about other people's applications, and I realized the ones that I really liked told me something, that they resonated with me like a good story. And story writing has been around, and storytelling has been around since the beginning of time. And it's what connects people. And actually, that's what your application needs to do. It needs to connect with somebody who can't see you, who can't ask you a question immediately about your application, and they're reading a ton of other stuff. And they're reading plenty of other applications. So it's to try and tell that story that resonates with someone. And the best way to tell a story is to tell your story. It's all about you. Your application is really all about you. And that's where it goes back to a little bit about having confidence in what you do. So what I would suggest is it's really hard to tell your story, particularly when you're low on confidence. Like you don't want to tell it, or it's like, ask yourselves right now, what is your story? Is it worth telling? And some people will be like, pretty average life. Like, what have I got to tell? For you guys, you're in your late teens or early 20s. Maybe feel like you haven't seen that much, but actually you've all got really amazing stories to tell, and your application needs to reflect that. Now, the way I look at it is the questions are there to direct you, and some of it's a little bit, what was your education from these days to these days? And that's pretty straightforward. But then there's usually a personal section on like a statement. Why do you want to be at this place? And that's to tell your story and link it to the organization you're applying to, and why would you be a fit in that organization. And it's about telling them exactly that. Don't make up something, well, because everybody else says, you know, oh, this is the #1 law firm, it's highest, I want to do commercial, and it does all the big M&A deals. Chances are you've never done an M&A deal and you don't know what one looks like. So just tell them why you feel you would want to do that, as opposed to this like overstating what they already know about themselves. So you need to link your story to the application you're writing and to the organization. And that means your resume as well, your CV also needs to be tailored. And each time you're telling your story, but in a slightly different way. And this is really hard. So what I'd recommend is writing your stories out. So like, get some applications, look at the types of questions, and look at what the organization it's to, and then write essentially why you want to be at that organization. And each one should be different, because your reasons for wanting to be there will be slightly different for everyone, because every organization is different. And actually that's going to be a really hard thing to do, because you'll find that it's really long, or it's way too short and doesn't tell you anything. And this is unfortunately, the one thing about writing applications and just any written work which you have to do at work is it takes time and practice. And sadly, you know, I think one of the reasons why I chose the BBC was the vocational nature of it. And then when I went into law firms and I started writing memos and opinions, I can tell you it was a shock to the system, both for me and my boss, because when he looked at my work, he was like, what the hell are you doing? This is way too long. It's too, like, we can't send this to a client. I was like, but this is the answer. And he's like, no, you need to change the way you write. And he really broke it down for me in terms of start with the conclusion, then go into why the advice. And I was like, but that's a bit stupid, because don't they want to know the advice first? And then he was like, well, no, this is the way you should write. Like, give them the answer and then explain it to them. And I was like, sort of like maths when I was at school, you know, having to do long division. It's like, you could just work it out and give the answer, but they're like, no, you get all the points for like showing the workings out after. And it's like, give the answer first, then the thing, then the evidence. So my suggestion to you is take time and write your stories out and really hone them and understand them, because then it will make doing many applications easy, because you'll know what to write instinctively, because it's your story and the reasons why you want to be there. And some of the information you put into an application is going to be standard, and then everything else is a continuation of questions that they're asking you. And to be honest, everybody asks the same questions in a different way. And I think you need to engage with that, and copying and pasting answers are always easy to tell, because I've seen it so many times where I get a resume and I can tell that they've forgotten to take something out which they applied to somebody else somewhere else, and that for me is an instant no. And it's not to say that that person isn't the right person, it's just that I've got a ton of other applications and that I need to filter them. And as much as I want a lot of great candidates applying, I have to still get one candidate out of that, and I'll use whatever tactics I can to filter. And if I'm seeing clearly overstated things, like, because I know that, you know, a junior lawyer will only be doing this type of work, and it's very unlikely they'll have this experience or the amount they're saying they had, so they get filtered out. And typos and mistakes like that is, as a lawyer, I was told it was unforgivable. And actually early in my career as well, I learned that the hard way when I drafted a contract and there was probably about 5 or 6 typos which I hadn't spotted. I sent it to the partner. He reviewed it, sent it back to me saying this is unacceptable as work product and you need to completely review this. And when I looked at it, I was like, I think the work's right. He's like, no, you've got typos in here. You can't send that to somebody else outside the work. So then he made me use a typewriter at the PA's desk to retype the contract. And let me tell you, that's a really, really hard way to learn. That was really early in my career, but it was a lesson that stuck with me forever. Is there any questions?
Yeah, you've got a couple, Kevin, in the chat box. So there's one from Iman who's saying, how can you come across as genuine, exactly who you are, in written applications without feeling the need to compromise?
Well, one, I don't think there's anything you need to compromise. You have to be yourself. If you're naturally a bubbly, confident self, it comes across in written work that way. And you think about like when you read news stories or stories in a paper, in magazines, in book, or think just written work in books, like putting aside textbooks, which are really plain and they're intended for a certain type of purpose. Like I'm reading books on leadership and trust and things like that, but it's all about people's personal stories, which are capturing me. And because they're genuine and it comes through in the language they use. And stick to language you know and you understand. And I'm not saying like you curse and you swear and how you would like, you do have to tailor it a little bit, but you should use the language you would normally use, like writing to your friend or writing to a loved person. I know a lot of people just use text now and emails and stuff, so they don't write letters, but actually starting writing letters is a great way of reconnecting with your true voice. But I would say, you need to practice and practice so you get to know yourself and almost write the applications to yourself. Get someone to check it that knows you and say, does this sound like me? Does this sound like who I am as a person? Because, you know, I've seen some stuff, applications, and it's usually in the cover letter, and you read in this cover letter, which is attached to a job application. And to be honest, you know, at the junior level, I know that people don't have experience. So it's about giving someone, it's about the fit. Are they going to fit in here? And so I look at the cover letter and say, oh, this person sounds really interesting. And then you meet them and they are completely different to what you're imagining as the reader when you're reading their cover story. And really you want to actually be connected. You want someone to almost like it's your brand of this is who I am. And when you read my writing and then when you speak to me, you know it's exactly the same person. And that is a skill that's going to come, but it will only come with practice. So I would say my advice would be ask other people who know you to read your work. And I'd say even if you're applying for 50 jobs or 50 training contracts and hoping to get one, get somebody to read that or get more than one person if it's going to overburden people. But it's always really good to get feedback from other people before you send it out. And I actually start asking people in the interviews that I do, did you send this application to anybody? Did you get anybody to read it? And some people are like, oh yeah, I'm terrible at typos, so I get it. And other people are like, no. And then particularly, and I still ask that question now to like even more senior people. Did you get somebody to read this? Because you put some stuff in it. And I'm one of those people that when I interview, I highlight stuff because I want to talk about it. Like everything you put down in an application, when you come to me, I want to talk about all of those different things because I'm trying to ascertain not whether you've got the technical skills to do the job, because generally as a lawyer, if you've got your law degree, you've passed either the bar or the LPC, I'm going to take it that at entry level, you've got the technical ability to do the job. It's all about what I can give you when you come in as part of your training. So that's the easy part. I want to be able to connect with you though, and build a relationship. So then I know that I can come to you with work, and I know that you'll tell me you don't understand, or you'll be open and honest. And the only way, but when I'm reading an application, I don't know that. And so I want then to, if I'm going to give you an interview, then you're very different in maybe a more negative way, and I can't connect with you in person, then that's a waste. And that's generally because you're writing for somebody else, and you're not writing for yourself. And I think that's the key, writing for yourself, i.e. being yourself in your writing.
Thanks, Kevin. We've got 2 more questions for you on this. The first one is, how do you make basic skills such as time management, leadership, and research stand out in an application through storytelling?
Okay. Well, leadership's probably the best one, because you just give examples, and we're going to come on to in the next slide in a second, but you need to be concise with it, because you've only got so many words. Applications generally have a word limit. So you need to pick which stories you're going to tell, and tell the ones that resonate most with you and that highlight you the most. Now, you don't know what the reader's going to think about it, but if you are passionate about it, you will write in that way. I think things like time management, give examples. Give examples of where you were under pressure and you managed time in a way that that you actually delivered on time, or you achieved something in the time frame you were given, or maybe overachieved. It's always better to show where you overachieved, because going into law, and particularly in law firms, I remember you need to exceed expectations. Kevin, exceed expectations is a very common phrase you'll hear, because it's all about client service. And you want those people to keep coming back to you, and the only way to do that is exceed their expectations. So show stories where you can do that. And if you don't have a story, don't make it up. Just ignore it, or put words of an example of where you may have failed and what you've learned from that, because that is also a positive story like that. And actually, that's quite deep, because it shows you've got the ability to self-reflect and to make to learn from your mistakes. And let's be honest, everybody makes mistakes. We're all human. It's very normal. It's the ability to learn from those. And I have a colleague here where I work, and he says, look, and we make safety critical parts for vehicles. So you don't want to make a mistake, but the fact is things do happen, because there's so much processes that still have humans in it. And it's all about, right, we've had an issue here. It's cost our company hundreds of thousands of dollars or euros. Let's not make this mistake again. And if he has that mistake again, then he looks at the people and says, what are you doing? Are you not self-reflecting on these mistakes? Because this is actually costing the organization hundreds of thousands of dollars, as well as potentially putting people's lives at risk. And we can't do that. So always learn from your mistakes. And it's good to show that, I think. And I was going to talk more about that in the second section, but yeah, I think that's easy ways. And did I answer that question?
Yeah, you did. There's one more just before you go on to your next bit, if that's okay, Kevin. Sure. It's what are the necessary attributes you should convey in a cover letter through storytelling? I found it difficult to fit my experiences in a way that appeals to my employer on one side of A4.
That is that's the great challenge, actually. And actually, can we go to the next slide? Because I think this sums it up. With all storytelling, and I know I'm talking a lot because I like talking. I guess that that's why I became a lawyer. You need to be, in your written work, it's not just cover letters. There's an expectation in organizations that you keep your written work short, because particularly in this global world, you don't know that the person who reads that, their first language is English, or is the same language you're writing in. So you need to keep it short to make it easy for them. Sharp means keep it concise and to the point. And what I said about practicing, take the story that you want to tell and practice writing it. And I'm guessing most of you probably use Twitter or some sort of form of social media. you're excellent at doing this, whereas I'm terrible with 140 characters or whether it's 200 and something now, to keep things short. Even on LinkedIn, where you get about 1,300 characters, and that's fine. I'm constantly having to go back and delete things. I'm terrible at that, but it's all about taking the same set of words and then what can I take out? Where can I rejig the sentences in a certain way? And that only comes with practice. Some people are naturally gifted at doing it, and I have this, I'd say, a rule at work where my colleagues who I work with is, if it's really, really important, take the time to write a full explanation of something to me. If it's something that you're just giving me almost as an update and I don't need to know all the details, then it has to fit in one side of A4 when I print it out. So if it's a memo, which has a header like that, the body of the work must fit into that. And I said, otherwise I won't read it. And there are plenty of people like that when you're applying for jobs. And remember, you're not the only one applying. And particularly when it comes to, it's so competitive for job applications that, you know, you're competing against maybe 100, 200 other people. And remember, somebody's actually got to read all of this stuff. And so they're going to filter it out, like I said before, on is it taking them too long to get through? So the only way to write your story inside of one side of A4 is to practice writing it into one side. And that means rejigging sentences, taking words out, looking at it and going, is this really important? What does this sentence come to convey? And if you go into corporate law, for instance, and you do IPOs, that's something you're going to have to do when you come to writing things like prospectuses like this for IPOs, companies going public. You have to verify every single sentence. And let me tell you, having done that job, it's tedious and boring, but it makes it easy when the sentences are really short and to the point, because it makes it easy to verify.
Brilliant. Should we move on to the next couple of slides? I'm conscious that you've got to leave in 3 minutes, Kevin. Is that still the case?
Sort of, but I can probably go over by a minute or two. So let's keep going.
So this is going to be your challenge to get this done as sharp and as
all right, then. Let's see if I can do that. Okay. One of the things is I put this slide in because there's a statistics that men will apply for roles even though they don't necessarily meet all the criteria, whereas women are less likely to apply unless they are meeting something like 90% of the criteria for a job. As someone who employs people, I can tell you that most job requirements are just there because we need to fill out pieces of paper, and we're very flexible for the right candidate. The way to overcome that then is to by telling your stories to get that connection with the reader, and that could be even explaining, well, you don't meet all the criteria. However, what you bring to the table is X, Y, and Z. So I think don't be afraid of not applying for a job because you don't meet every single criteria. Now, if it's something like you must absolutely have French for this job and you don't, then yeah, it's probably not worth applying. But if it's something like you must have 5 years of experience in this, and actually you've only got 3, well, they may look at you and go, you've actually got great experience where you are, which, to be honest, between 3 and 5 years, there's not going to be significant difference there. So don't be afraid. Have that confidence in your ability to shine. Right, let's go on to the next. I think that's the last one on this.
Yep. Cool. So let's go to the next session and be supersonic about it.
Yeah, right. Navigating a career in law. All right, let's go to the first slide. Question to you is, if you close your eyes and just think about, what does a lawyer look like to you? And if you want to put some of those words into the chat of just descriptions of what the lawyer is, and maybe I'll have it if I can get through. My point is that if you look in that mirror there, a lawyer should look like you because you want to be a lawyer. So you are the lawyer. And that someone used to say that to me when I started out. They'd asked me my opinion. I was like, well, I don't know. I've never done this before. And they said, but your job title is solicitor or lawyer. And so that's your job title. So you're the lawyer. Give me the answer. And it made me really build confidence in myself. I think also part of this is not everybody, like, unfortunately, this profession, whilst it is getting better, has not and has been slow to embrace diversity, both in terms of gender, race, colour, people from different socio-economic backgrounds. And unfortunately, we're still trying to change that. But I want you to know that no matter what you look like and what your background is, if you want to be a lawyer and you can pass the law exams to get through, then you can be a lawyer. Let's go to the next slide. But it's bloody tough. And particularly when you don't look like everybody else. The stereotypical Oxbridge white male. We now have like the stale male and pale thing when we talk about board of directors. Even in my company, I'm the brownest person in the senior level in my organization. And when I look around the room, I realize I'm also, you know, from a very different background. I'm not privileged. I'm not, you know, my parents were immigrants to the UK, and my mum's a nurse, and my dad worked many different jobs, and then retired as someone who worked for the council doing temporary accommodation. But he, you know, he had so many different jobs, and I still managed to go through university and fight my way into a career that I absolutely love. So just know that it's tough, but also know that there's people like Zinat who's doing these things to help you guys. There's people like me, and you have a lot of peers in the organization who we have our hands out for you to help you. And you should connect and try and connect with as many people. But you know, we have to be realistic. The world today isn't where we want it to be. And part of that challenge is once you get your foot in the door is to help hold that door open for people who look and sound and have backgrounds like you. Let's go to the next slide. So I want to quickly talk about imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome looks like that guy over there, which is me without the beard a few months ago. I have imposter syndrome. When I was asked to do this, I was like, oh, is this, am I the right person to be talking about this? I don't know. And really that comes down to confidence. You know, there's times when I feel absolutely confident walking into a room of peers, and there's other times when I know my stuff, but I don't. What I was told and what I realize is everybody gets it. That's the secret. Everybody you're talking to, everybody in that work. So imagine you getting into, you've gone through the interview, you wrote your application, you did the interview, you've got the job. Now you're in this cohort of trainee lawyers, and they're all from completely different backgrounds, and mostly they look the same and they're different to you. Don't worry. They feel nervous. They don't realize that how much you know, and that makes them nervous. So don't worry about feeling like you're an imposter in amongst that group. You're not. If you've got in, you deserve to be there. And so I think by remembering that everybody suffers from this at every single level, and I've been working for well over 20 years in this career, and in this profession, and I still get it. And even today, before today, I was getting in it. So, you know, don't worry. Just remember that, breathe, be confident, and go back to courage. Have courage. And even if you're only doing a little of what you want to do, just do that. Any questions on that, or shall I move on?
Just
so the question of, or you don't feel like you belong somewhere, and yes, you do. You have every right to apply for that job. You have every right to have the career you want to have. Have courage. know yourself. Can we move to the next slide? Sorry. Know yourself. Your story and you are special, and it will connect with people. So, but you have to fully understand yourself to be able to share that, and just be yourself. Like going back to that question earlier in Suzanne's session about being told you're bossy, and I said just be yourself. Well, like that's the best way to connect with people. Now you might need to make tweaks if you're a little bit arsy or something like that, but look, generally being yourself is the best way to connect with other people, and that means you have to be genuine. And that's it. I didn't quite.
Yeah, you did, Kevin. So impressed. Straight and to the point.
All right. Unfortunately, I really do have to go because I've got a court hearing by Zoom.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for joining us. I'll encourage everyone to connect with you on LinkedIn and feel free to get in touch with you if they've got any specific questions. But thank you so much. So feel free to drop off when you need to, but we really appreciate your time. For anybody else who's got any questions that maybe I can assist with, feel free to unmute or drop them in the chat, and I'm happy to stay for another 5 minutes or so if anybody wants to ask anything, or feel free to leave as well. It's absolutely up to you. And if there's a sea of silence, then it might be that it's time to go, which is absolutely fine as well. Just a reminder to connect with us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and we've got some exciting projects in line for the end of the year, so look out for that. And thank you all so much for joining. If anyone's got any questions, as I say, just feel free to unmute, and I'll stick around for the next couple of minutes. Otherwise, feel free to go and enjoy your evening.
Hi, Zena. I have a quick question.
Hello.
Hi. I think I asked it earlier, but then Suzanne had to go off. I was asking how you navigate in a room where people who are seen as like intimidating or cold, or who act superior are respected more. I've had this experience more in sort of social settings rather than in front of an interview panel.
Yeah, I did see your question from earlier. I think it's a really important question, and it's quite a difficult one, because sometimes I feel like people project and present themselves in a particular way because they feel that that's what's going to get them a particular platform or particular attention. In my experience, if you are someone who feels like you don't want to be like that, because obviously that's not who you are, that's not aligned with your values, then you absolutely should not feel like you have to be that way, and just try and retain that confidence that you have in your own ability, aligned with your own values, and exactly with what Kevin was just saying, just being yourself and finding your own ways of engaging with people. So if it's at a networking event, for example, finding ways on your own terms to try and build relationships with people without feeling like you've actually got to become a not very nice person and, you know, be a bit arrogant or cocky or, you know, submissive. And sometimes you might feel like actually you're not as successful in developing those relationships because you're not being like that. But I guess that's a decision you have to make. Are you comfortable with trying to be somebody else to try and get these contacts, or actually would you rather make those contacts on your own terms? And I'm a firm believer in this notion of remaining true to yourself, and with that, you know, everything good will follow. Like, I just don't think that we should have to be like somebody else, or definitely not emulate horrible characteristics that we see. And let's be honest, in law, at the bar, I'm sure it's the same in the solicitor field as well. We do see a lot of these horrible characteristics, but that's part of the problem with the profession, right? So as new people coming in, we definitely don't want to be replicating that. And I think that unless we start to change some of this, then things will carry on being the way that they are. So I'm not sure that directly answers your question, but I think it's just about remembering who you are, remembering your values, remembering why you don't want to be that idiot that's being an idiot at the networking event, and just having the confidence to kind of navigate on your own terms, and having faith that in time you'll get to where you need to get to. You'll build those relationships and you'll build that rapport.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries. Does anybody else have any comments or questions before we draw to a close? Nope. Okay, everyone remains all muted. So in that case, I'll draw the session to an end. Thank you all so much again for joining us. Keep a lookout for future events, and I hope you have a good evening and enjoy the rest of your week. Take care, everybody. All the best.